The Key of Hermetic Science. Written by an inhabitant of the North. In his hours of leisure. 1732. To nature, the unsullied virgin. And to art, which follows her as its guide. I very humbly consecrate my evening recreations. I, who am a grain of dust of paradise. A man. To the benevolent reader. It seems to me that I hear you grumble at the sight of this brochure. You are astonished that we are not in the mood to let dry yet another spring which has already supplied enough to fill so much paper and so many books. Truly, you will say, is it indeed from the north, where long ago the sources of Helicon were seized by ice, that we should expect something new upon this matter? From there, no doubt, must come to the Egyptian goddess Isis, and to her ancient mysteries, the restoration of their first brilliance and their ancient splendor. If you consider further the name, the amusements, and the occupations of the author, how greatly will you not be deceived in your expectation, and how strange will you not judge this enterprise? If you yourself are fair-minded, suspend your judgment in a cause of which you are not yet sufficiently informed. Scythia once had its Aborides and its Zamolxes. If you claim that we are in error because we do not sing the same song as fabulous antiquity, read all, and you may perhaps say with the poet, happy in their error, whom the bears despise. For I cannot persuade myself that the horn of abundance of nature is so utterly exhausted, that she, whom others have called a good mother, should be to us who inhabit these climates a stepmother, and that she should not wish us to recognize her as mother by some merit or benefit on her part toward us. I am mistaken, or she too opens her breast to us. If you love this breast, white as snow, full of milk, and breathing a gentle warmth, risk something, as children do, with simple, flattering, and affectionate ways. I hope that in reading these few pages you will find things of which others have not spoken. If they amuse you usefully, I shall believe my wish is accomplished, and this will incite me to attempt something more important. But if they displease you, pardon the zeal I have to oblige my neighbor. The author. The Most High, to crown creation, formed man and endowed him with qualities so diverse and so beautiful that he did not hesitate to declare that he was made in his image. Holy Scripture bears witness, and the Christian religion sufficiently persuades us, of how many benefits God has overwhelmed him with thereafter, though he was rebellious and his enemy, and that he did not even spare his only Son for the salvation of humankind. These testimonies are above all exception. And although faith believes many things that reason does not comprehend, yet both agree in this, that man is of all creatures the most noble. This truth is so clear, and made such an impression upon the ancients, who were not enlightened by revelation, that the Egyptians, very avid for sciences, made their principal study the art of knowing oneself. The Greeks, who drew their doctrines from the Egyptians, having carried back into their country this same rule, which they regarded as the foundation of all wisdom, caused these words to be placed upon the doors and walls of their famous temple of Delphi. Consul te ipsum, nos te metipsum. Et ambula ab intra. Consult yourself, know yourself. And walk inwardly. After long experience had made men perceive the harmony that exists between man and the universe, he was believed to be the abridgment of the all, or rather the little world. This is the key to the seal of that great Hermes, whose emblem is a hand holding a sphere, or rather a little world, with this inscription. What is above is the same as what is below. I do not trouble myself with the reveries of the alchemists, who force these words to serve in confirming their chimeras. It suffices that their great chief drew this from the most hidden mysteries of nature. Hence the same said in the Asclepius. For this reason, O Aesculapius, man is a great miracle. An animal who ought to be honored and adored. One might sometimes be inclined to dispute this prerogative of man, by alleging the miserable lot of human beings, far inferior to that of other animals in the three kingdoms of nature, whether in regard to manner of life and clothing, or to strength and vigor of vital spirits, senses, etc. So that if I turn my eyes upon myself, I learn nothing else but to recognize my extreme imperfection, and that I am threatened with a flood of evils ready to break upon my head. Yet I do not intend to decide whether such reflection be opposed to the aim of our axiom, or whether its usefulness shows itself rather in theology and moral philosophy. Let me be permitted to meet this question with another: who has taught you that you are the most wretched of all creatures? Doubtless it is your reason, and the strength of our rule. But if the force of our rule reveals to you your misery, the preservation of yourself commands you to seek remedies against that same misery. Consequently my rule is useful and salutary to you. But if it is reason, tell me, in what creature except man do you find reason? Therefore the creature endowed with reason is the most excellent of all. Venerable Antiquity did not judge the excellence of man by his bodily, earthly, and elemental parts, which daily experience teaches us are subject to numberless calamities, and which must be rendered back to the elements from which they come, but rather by the admirable connection and concurrence of superior and inferior virtues found in man as in their center. These great men, seeing that other animals were composed only of two parts, an organized body and vital spirit, remarked in man a third thing which subsisted after death, which they sometimes named soul, sometimes celestial fire, or else genius or spirit. Deprived of revelation, they formed diverse ideas concerning the homeland and origin of man, whom they judged to differ entirely from the rest of creatures by his operations, among which they counted intelligence, will, sound reason, wisdom, love for mathematical truths, which cannot deceive, and other notions not found in beasts. In this way they assured themselves of the existence of the soul, but as they were uncertain of its essence and of what became of it after the ruin of the body, they placed certain souls among the number of the gods and demigods, especially those of heroes and sages. But we, who are better instructed in these matters by the very author of the soul, know not only the reasons known to the pagans, but we discover every day still new and surer operations by faith, faith which the Christian soul conceives, but which the beasts entirely ignore. If the Creator had not granted us this soul directly and habitually, man would be no more capable than other animals of having any ideas of God, or of receiving the gospel and the truths of the Christian religion, though they were preached to him 1,000 times. This alone proves that there is in man something hidden which awakens as from sleep at the notions presented to him. If it were not so, man would be condemned unjustly by the just judge to eternal punishments, for having neglected truths he was as incapable of knowing as the ox, the grass, or the stone. It would be no less unjust for a creditor to demand repayment of a sum he had never lent. But if a debtor loses or neglects through his fault the sum entrusted to him, he is rightly punished, unless the creditor grant him grace. To this creature alone has the eternal Creator entrusted something eternal. Man therefore differs from other animals in that he is endowed with a rational and immortal soul, so that he deserves rather to be placed above them than to be counted among them. By this the other inhabitants of the elements know both the subjection and inferiority of man, as well as his dominion and excellence. To this I add sound reason, which is a faint ray of the lost divine image. The ancient Chaldean, Egyptian, and Hebrew philosophers strove with all their power to repair, through knowledge of most wise nature, that ray which the fall of our first parents had left almost extinguished. They knew that Adam had been expelled from Eden, but they never found that Eden had been removed from the face of the earth. Quite the contrary, they knew that access to it was carefully guarded, as to a palace whose gates are tightly closed, which does not prove, however, that the edifice no longer exists or that the treasures hidden there are no more. They therefore addressed themselves to their Isis, nature, and finding her endowed with so much wisdom, richness, and generosity, they were so astonished that they made it their sole study to know her. And since this chaste virgin does not easily repulse those who truly love her, provided they seek her after obtaining permission from her father, and are not animated by false and foolish love for Aristotle and logical or scholastic subtleties, but devote themselves wholly to her, they knew how to win her good graces by constant caresses, so that she herself taught them the true path to visit and penetrate her most hidden secrets, demanding no other reward than praises for her great author, and prudence and silence from her lovers. All the books and writings of the happy and thrice happy ancient sages and scholars show how far they attained by this way, and the marvelous monuments that still remain to us bear palpable testimony that neither our wealth, nor our strength, nor all our knowledge in mathematics and architecture, mechanics, sculpture, astronomy, physics, chemistry, magic, etc., can reach the height of sublimity to which science had formerly attained, much less compare with it. Whoever doubts this, or desires to know more, may consult Herodotus, Plato, Democritus, Josephus, Pansarol, Morhoff, Baricius, and many others. But in order that this bond which exists between man and nature, which they named the Great Chain, and that divine science which they had acquired with so much care and toil, should not be lost with them and fall into oblivion, they took great pains to transmit it to posterity, upon columns, upon marble, wood, stone, and in books in hieroglyphic and sacred characters, so that only the worthy sons of the art might be instructed therein, and the vulgar excluded. But the sciences have suffered the same fate as great kingdoms, cities, and entire nations. The desire to reign gave birth to discord and quarrels, the philosophers were then exiled, the monuments of genius buried under the ruins of their fatherland, and nature, become widowed, as it were, enclosed herself within her own virtue. To this succeeded ignorance, forgetfulness, barbarity, ferocity, together with contempt and hatred for the arts and sciences. History reports that the Emperor Diocletian ordered, under pain of death, that all the books of the sages of Egypt which had escaped the injuries of time should be gathered, destroyed, and burned, so that this people, extremely inclined to revolt, might not draw once more from those books riches of which the predecessors of this prince had so often stripped them. But since wisdom has this in common with truth, that she may indeed be persecuted for a time, but never wholly oppressed nor destroyed, there remained, despite her misfortune, so many traces of her former brilliance that, when the Arabs entered Egypt in later centuries, she knew how to attach to herself their kings and princes. Some Greeks and Latins, at least in the first centuries of Christianity, when the mysteries of Ceres were brought from Egypt, had meanwhile the happiness of approaching her, but they were so few in number that, except for one or another, and that excellent master himself, the names of the others are scarcely known. The Arabs and the Saracens, enriched by this science, not only made themselves masters of great kingdoms, but soon became illustrious by the great number of philosophers they produced, of which the superb monuments that still subsist in the kingdoms of Granada and Mercia, and elsewhere, where the barbarity of the Turks has spared them, bear witness. Witness also the most respectable authors, who confirm it with their testimony. It is deplorable that this people should have been so envious as to wish to possess wisdom alone, so that a small number among them, far from pointing out in their books the simple way of nature, introduced falsehoods in order to divert those who sought her, falsehoods which destroy her rather than help or restore her. And as they were not ignorant that the insatiable thirst for gold possesses man, they were concerned only with attracting him more and more, and withdrawing him at the same time away from the simple path of nature, which, in my opinion, is the only true one, to cast him into an infinity of other particular paths. They confined themselves, I say, solely to the mineral and metallic realm, maintaining that gold could not be made without gold, just as from a cow comes a cow, from a horse, etc. The foundations of this rule are very true, for it is not possible for nature to produce gold without the seed of gold, and it will likewise not be possible for the greatest philosopher to dissolve it philosophically and reduce it into seed of gold without our means and without the balance of nature. But here is the difficulty, to find the means of procuring for ourselves the entrance into this royal and closed palace. The Arabs took great care to hide it from us, saying nothing of it, and their disciples and partisans, the philosophers of our century, have done the same. For although they scatter abroad golden sentences, saying with one voice, "Attach yourselves to nature," they have nevertheless so disguised her, masking and clothing her with foreign garments, that hardly could Hermes himself recognize her. I do not intend to break a lance with these great men, nor to refute their arguments. On the contrary, I esteem much their skill and their precaution in concealing the secrets of nature. Let it be permitted me, however, to say this once: so long as you follow the traces marked in their books, you will never attain the goal you have proposed to yourself. Whoever does not lead you directly to the dwelling of nature does not keep to the true road, but leads you away from it. Yet I wish to give you a piece of advice, provided you can resolve, after you have read certain authors whose sincerity is well attested, to erase seriously from your mind all desire to visit crude metals and minerals of every sort, and if, on the contrary, you apply yourself solely to the generations of nature and to examining them, you may be well persuaded that you are entered upon the royal road. Here is what I have found by my researches. You shall judge yourself, from the opinion in which I stand on this subject, and which I am going to communicate to you without reserve, whether I have advanced or not. If my opinion does not please you, seek, I pray you, a better, and impart it to me with the same frankness. The path that I shall point out to you will not at least engage you to make great expense or useless labors in the manner of the philosophers, for besides the ordinary expenses which you are obliged to make for your subsistence, it will cost you no more than 2 or 3 ecus. My matter is neither animal, nor vegetable, nor mineral, but it partakes of all 3. It is universal, and more frequent in the world than any other thing whatsoever. It must by microcosmic sympathy be named so, and it deserves it. It is always and everywhere to be found, at the bottom of the Indies, in the midst of Rome, by day and by night, in summer as in winter. It can be had with very little and with much danger, and no mortal can do without it. It is never at rest, but always in action and in movement, never exposed, but always hidden from sight. The mine where it is found is deep and covered with thick darkness, for it is enclosed in narrow places and in the entrails of the earth, whence my matter is drawn forth and manifested suddenly by the artist. Its origin is from the earth, and its life from heaven. Hence it is living and not dead. This mercury is indeed vulgar, but by no means common. The common is a cold fluid, mine is a warm fluid. Much must be done and labored to purify the one, while mine requires but one single work, and that is proper to me. Mine resides and is to be found only in one body, although everything that lives under the sky is jealous of it. It has the same color at the end as it had at the beginning, though it be infinitely exalted. It is formed from an infinity of other matters, from which it indicates by analysis, when crude, its affinities with the 3 kingdoms. Although it is not possible for me to compose it, I am not troubled, for nature gives it to me prepared and composed as much as it needs to be for my purpose. It is very vile and very abject, but also very precious and very cherished, even before the first operation. Its name is very well known to all the world, but its virtues are more than unknown and untried. It has deceived many who promised themselves great things from its excellence and its celestial origin, and who made every effort to perfect it, ignorant of its true and friendly concoction. Hence it has happened that great philosophers have rejected and condemned it, and rightly so, since it cannot be dissolved, nor die, nor be vivified, nor perfected, except in itself and by itself, in a single manner truly natural, fitting, hidden, and philosophical. Every elemental fire, even the least, whatever name it be given, either chases it away or kills it, or at least renders it incapable of being philosophically resurrected. So that the matter is more useless than one could believe without exact knowledge of the fire, the vessel, and the Athenor. The authors help us less than nothing to discover these things, for they have so carefully effaced the traces that they mislead even the young who suspect the truth. In extolling as so many oracles their errors, their trifles, and their dreams, they cause those who believe them to waste infinite pains and much money, and make them fall into labyrinths whence they often escape only after dissipating all their goods. Must one then be astonished if this noble science, and these researches into the most perfect preparation that exists in nature, are today so hated and find so great a number of enemies? I greatly doubt that the necessity which the philosophers allege for hiding these things can justify their conduct, since it seems that it is better to be silent than to deceive. For my part, I maintain that nature is the only guide and the only mistress in this work, for remembering her author, she cannot deceive herself nor others. The matter being thus known to me, I must still consider and inquire how it must be corrected and purified. This is not done by any elementary or artificial fire, in any vessel or furnace, but by its own fire which the Creator gave from the beginning, immediately to nature, and which we inherit. The plowman knows it, despite the grossness of his wit, and the most expert alchemist entirely ignores it. We feel its virtue at every moment, yet we do not know the place of its dwelling after it has withdrawn. It is invisible, yet not insensible, gentle, vaporous, continuous, equal, and it rests around the bare matter. By this very thing it is maintained, nourished, and dissolved. It dies, is corrupted, sprouts, greens, flowers, and is vivified, corrected, perfected, increased, and multiplied. Its search is much more difficult than that of the matter itself, since it can never be found in books. Therefore the knowledge of this fire must be preferred far above that of the matter, for the knowledge of the matter alone contributes little to that of the fire, whereas the latter once known, the knowledge of the other can scarcely remain hidden. The vessel also is neither artificial nor made by hand, but natural and homogeneous, oblong with a neck, closed and open according as necessity requires, opaque and dark. In this, which is the only one and unique upon the earth, the matter begins, is cooked, and perfected. It may be had everywhere and at any time, and costs not so much as the fire of the matter, which costs many people dearly. It closes itself hermetically and opens. It receives no more than is fitting and refuses the superfluous, so that one need not trouble oneself about proportion or quantity, for nature knows well how much she needs, provided she is supplied with the necessary aids. I have also but one furnace, which is indeed of earth but natural, and to whose construction art has no part. It is furnished with 2 vents, its sides are opaque, yet it is so mobile that I can easily carry it from one place to another, and even take it with me on long journeys without any trouble or fear of betrayal. What is astonishing is that my Athanor contains within itself the strongest fire of nature, or, as others express it, the 4th degree of fire, and it subsists by its virtue, yet it is broken and destroyed by the least elemental fire, or even by that of a lamp. By this you may convince yourself how greatly it differs from an artificial vessel. What renders this work difficult is 1. The knowledge and care of the hours of delivery, for this work strongly resembles the generation of man, in that it has its hours of conception and of birth. 2. The governance of the fire, wherein those who do not employ the required precautions often err and by this ruin the whole building, a rock which may easily be avoided if one is attentive and circumspect. 3. The secret of the art, which I quickly learned by going back to its first source. The rest is easy and by no means unpleasant, except for the stinking odor which strikes at the beginning. The colors are 3 in number, black, white equal to snow, and the third resembling ruby, though the mixture of these 3 produces still others. I leave each one to examine, from what has just been said, whether this excellent work is so toilsome and so difficult that it must be entirely despised and rejected, or else treated as folly, like the chimera of a troubled brain. I rather believe that it is so easy and so simple that it can be done as well by one of my peasants, entirely ignorant of chemistry, provided I whisper some word beforehand into his ear, as by the most excellent philosopher. But here is the first and true cause why nature has hidden this open and royal palace from so many philosophers, even from those of a most subtle spirit. It is because, turning aside from their youth from the simple path of nature by conclusions of logic and metaphysics, and deceived by the illusions of the best books themselves, they imagine and swear that this art is deeper and more difficult than any metaphysics whatsoever, although ingenuous nature proceeds herein, as in all her other operations, with a step direct and very simple. We have but one single matter, one simple cooking. The matter, the vessel, the furnace, and the fire are but one and the same thing. What need is there to seek in distant lands what we have sufficiently at home? But abject and despised nature is not an object fit to attract the attention and esteem of these great philosophers. And even if they knew her, she would not appear worthy to men of such merit to make her their occupation and their study, men who despise the knowledge of themselves, and who through ostentation and avarice lift themselves up to the stars and planets, and associate them as worthy friends, who turn first toward their chief the sun, and after offering him the moon in marriage, demand as reward a free access to the immense treasures of the bridegroom. But in vain does one expect lineage from the dead. The proud idols of the vulgar enjoy no privilege above the others in our work. They need our water as soon as they will sow, and will ravish by their fruit those who labor upon the sun. This, however, is not the principal end of a true philosopher. He regards the offspring of this prince of planets as an amusement, and as the first rudiments of his knowledge. What matters it to him who can make and acquire at will riches surpassing those of both Indies, to have a great heap of gold and silver? The possession of these goods daily causes their possessors cares and anxieties, and exposes them to diverse dangers. At last they must be abandoned, and they bring scarcely any other advantage to their owners than that which is common to most mortals, I mean to satisfy hunger and quench thirst. At last pale death strikes as well at the door of a palace as at that of a cottage. But to him to whom the gate of nature is opened, nothing is lacking but to know her almighty author. It is to acquire this knowledge that he devotes all his strength, who sees before his eyes that all tends to his glory, and it is not surprising that, despising and abandoning all things of the earth, he gives himself wholly to the love and desire which carries him toward the author and the master of the universe. He who has acquired a taste for eternity ardently desires to leave this life in order to be put in possession of it, and he who has lived in exile, as a stranger in distant lands, though free and in safety, does not hesitate to return to his homeland. This provides an answer to those who ask why it is so rarely seen that the philosophers, to whom all things ordinarily succeed, and who have such exact knowledge of medicine, do not live longer than other men. It is because nothing mortal remains for them to desire. The Most High has set two limits to our days, the one accidental and the other natural. No mortal, not even the philosopher, can surpass the latter. As for the former, as the science of the Magi teaches, it can be prolonged by the divine will and the removal of obstacles. Our first fathers, and those who lived before the flood, provide examples, as do several philosophers. The first of these two terms is ordinary and common to all mortals of our age. This will appear more clearly by the example of a lamp or a burning candle, which burns as long as the wick lasts, that is, until the second term, unless it is extinguished by some accidental cause, which constitutes the first term. The candle or lamp of our life would also burn until its material or vital oil were consumed, if it were not extinguished by age, or by some violent accident, by a weak constitution, or by intemperance, debauchery, and indulgence, whence proceed many diseases, or by some other accidental cause. The science of the sages can do much against this first term, unless, having better things before their eyes, they obtain from the Creator, by their prayers, to depart quickly to be with him. But to return to our subject, many things are found in books concerning the three distinct works, that is to say, the animal, the vegetable, and the mineral, the great and the small work, the work of Saturn, the moist and the dry path. I do not intend to diminish the authority of such excellent men, nor to resist and combat so many oracles. Yet I much doubt whether by all these names they did not wish to designate one and the same thing, and whether they are not different degrees in the operation, and whether all, by so many names, did not aim at the same goal. I have no difficulty in believing that many of them, after having obtained the true mercury, sought diverse ways to shorten the work, since the patience of the moderns hardly extends to bearing this excellent yet long work to that final degree of perfection which is permitted to art and to nature. Nevertheless, I have never been able to persuade myself that any of the philosophers could have brought his work to the desired end by any other mercury than the matter of which I have spoken above, and by my method, in which alone nature has hidden the keys of her treasure, and in which, finally, there is nothing superfluous, but where all is transformed by assiduous cooking into a glorious elixir. This is the moist and dry path, this is the work animal, vegetable, and mineral at the same time. For daily experience teaches us that nature, according to her good pleasure and the disposition of the matter, can produce as well an animal as a plant, a mineral, and a metal. The regimes and the colors set before our eyes, in the course of the work itself, the true seeds of all the planets. From this great work proceed, as streams from a source, many particular things which I do not recount, though they are very short, because they are very far removed from the perfection of this universal, and because they are also very difficult, uncertain, and vain, if the least error should slip in. The path of the water-bearer of the sages may perhaps be known to me also, but I have never undertaken to work upon it, because the task is infinite and very disagreeable, and requires the exact labor of one accustomed to blowing the coals. When in my work I have once entrusted my broth, well enclosed, to its fire and to its furnace, I have no further need of any master nor any other guide than nature herself. She is never idle, she always works, and tends step by step to a new resurrection and to the highest perfection. Even if the artist should sometimes err, she at once corrects his error. The only thing to be regretted is that she requires so much time, for hardly can she, within the space of 2 years, be led to a rotation useful and fruitful. She still requires an artist attentive and free from all other cares, lest through his negligence or the hindrance of other business the fruit of many months of work be lost in a moment. My distractions, caused by public affairs, have been the reason, for example, that on 3 different occasions I began this work again without success, and that I was unable to complete what I saw with my master, what I heard there, and what I handled with my hands. If you have more patience, leisure, and freedom, be content and of cheerful humor, pray without ceasing until the end, and you may be sure of having found upon earth the sovereign good after God. This it is which restores health, strengthens youth, increases goods, and preserves until the last breath the desirable tranquility of the spirit. This is the golden fleece of the Greeks, the light and the justice of the Hebrews, the resplendent star of the Magi, which guided them in the search for the knowledge of the Lord of nature and of the uncreated Word. I finish by recommending to you that before all things you take care to conciliate the grace of the author of nature, and not to approach these mysteries against his will, for he removes and gives them to whom he pleases. With him we can do all things, without him we can do nothing. Pray to him with all your heart that he may make you know how the heavens and their hosts declare his glory. To him be honor and glory forever. Kabbalah of the Table of Pythagoras. 1. Chaos or matter, the number I, and the circle O, by which the soul. 2. Of the world O, or the sun, by or the moon its matrix B, makes. 3. The spirit, the soul, and the body. These 3 principles of nature, still intellectual, give, after having added the first number, a perfect compound of the 4 elements. 4. P-O-N-M. That is to say, or else, our earth. From there, this divine and inscrutable number, the magical ternary, having overcome the 2 with the aid of the 4, advances with glory toward the first, whence it becomes perfect. From there, this ineffable thing, the tetragram of the Greeks, and the scheme hemepharash of the Hebrews. Each line of it expresses the name of the Lord, and as it is composed of pure vowels, and no word in the world can be pronounced without a vowel, so likewise nothing in the world can exist nor subsist without God, whence comes the saying of the Egyptians, Jupiter fills all things. The same Pythagoras wished to signify the same thing by his divine table, which he had brought from Egypt or from Palestine. These unities together give the number x, perfect, which, dissected anatomically through the middle, the left horn being raised perpendicularly, gives the letter L, but the 2 horns together give the letter V, and in whole the letter X, whence comes LVX, which makes one single word by which it has pleased God to leave to man some idea of himself. Corollaries. The geometer learns from this the quadrature of the circle, and perpetual motion, namely, by the circulation of the 4 elements. The arithmetician, the production of the sensible number from things purely intellectual. The grammarian, the origin of letters. The end.